Okay, we're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome all of you to the ISO 9001-2015 Approaching Your Transition with Confidence webinar. My name is Joe Krolikowski and I'm the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for everyone. All of our participants are on mute, but we absolutely want to address your questions today, so please use the question portion of the dashboard. We will address questions at the conclusion of the presentation. A very common question that we get is, will a copy of this presentation be available? Yes, we will make the slides available shortly after the presentation is finished. And this webinar and all other PJR webinars will be available for reviewing on our website under previously recorded webinars. Our topics for today, we're going to review why the changes to the ISO 9001 standard were so dramatic. We're going to review the transition process and how it will be handled. We're going to have a discussion on the key changes to ISO 9001, including an assessment of the impact on those new requirements in the audit process. We have some FAQs from past presentations. I have a few concluding remarks, and then we will take your questions. So let's begin with why the changes to ISO 9001 were so dramatic. Well, the industries that use ISO 9001 have evolved, and there has been a lot of push to get ISO 9001 to continue to grow in service sectors. So the ISO itself has long felt that the ISO 9001 standard needs to keep up with the times. It needs to be a standard that is palatable to service industries, even more so than it was before. They wanted to try to simplify some of the language that's used, and their most important goal was to improve the cross-compatibility between standards. In the past, if you had an organization that was interested in multiple certifications, say ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, those companies very often had to have separate systems for each of the certifications that they wanted to maintain. And we're going to learn today how that challenge was overcome in this latest update. I do want to draw everybody's attention to a new resource that was made available, and that is the ISO TS 9002. Now 9002 was published on November 1st, 2016. Hereafter in our presentation we will be referring to it as ISO 9002. Its full title is Quality Management Systems, Guidelines for the Application of ISO 9001-2015. It is a sanctioned guidance document, and what it does is it provides clause-by-clause ideas on fulfilling the requirements. It's not a certifiable standard on its own, but it's intended to give you some food for thought, so to speak, some perspective on meeting one requirement or another. And we're going to be providing references to key pieces of ISO 9002 throughout our presentation today. It is available for purchase from the ISO website if you're so inclined. The clock is ticking on ISO 9001-2008. We have a little over a year to go. It is going to be expiring on September 14th, 2018. That's, of course, taken from the publication date of ISO 9001-2015. So PJR, for its part, we had to establish our own policy on the cutoff for our auditing of ISO 9001-2008. And here is how that was approached. Effective March 14th, 2017, new certifications, whether they be through Stage 2 or recertification, to ISO 9001-2008 are no longer available. We selected that date because it represented the halfway point in the transition timeline. and it ensured that any new certifications would have at least a year of operation prior to an attempted transition. Now, we are still offering surveillance audits, and those will continue to be available up until May of next year. Now, that date was selected to ensure that any last-minute transitions can be processed with no lapse in certification. Now, please bear in mind both of those dates are PJR internal requirements only, and we will consider exceptions on a case-by-case basis. In terms of how the transition audit will be handled, we are prepared to offer a transition at any point in your certification stage, as long as the dates are within the time frame we looked at on the previous slide. Now, the ideal approach is to transition as part of your recertification audit. The recertification audit already includes additional audit time. Obviously, it includes a new certificate, but we recognize that that's not always going to be practical for our clients. And so we also offer transitioning as part of an annual surveillance audit, or even 2 consecutive semi-annual surveillance audits. Now, in both cases, there is a small amount of additional audit time. That's going to vary a bit from case to case. And also, in both an annual or consecutive semi-annual surveillance audits, what you're going to be getting is a revised certificate, not a brand new certificate, but a revised certificate. And let's have a look at how that would work. So let's say that you had in January of 2016 an ISO 9001-2008 certificate that was issued following either a recertification or stage 2 audit. And that certificate bore number C2016-12345, issued January 15th of 2016 and expiring September 14th, 2018. That expiry date, of course, is due to the mandatory cutoff that was established for ISO 9001-2008 certificates. So now, in early 2018, let's say that you complete a transition to ISO 9001-2015, and this results in a revised certificate. So now we have same certificate number, C2016-12345, but it now has an R1 for revision 1. Same issue date, January 15th, 2016, but now it bears an expiry of January 14th, 2019. Now bearing the full 3-year period, as is typical for an ISO 9001 certificate issued by PJR. Now, in terms of the amount of additional time that's going to be needed, we have prepared internally a special grid for determining the amount of time needed. The full measure of the detail is considered confidential, but we can confirm a couple of items. Most of our clients will require only a half day of additional audit time. Again, this is if you are pursuing a transition as part of a surveillance. We've established earlier that if it's being done as part of a recertification, there is no special added audit time. Some of our clients will be able to transition with no added audit time at all. If you need further information on this, I do encourage you to reach out to either your scheduler or your sales representative. Let's begin now an exploration of the key changes found in this new version of ISO 9001. Any discussion of ISO 9001 must begin with Annex SL. Annex SL is a 10-section blueprint for authoring all of the ISO family of standards. It is a set of core text, core definitions, common terms, even verbiage, mandatory verbiage. And the idea is that it is to be used for any ISO published standard. It is a 10-section standard, and the breakdown is as follows. Sections 1 through 3 are non-auditable, Therein you will find the scope of the standard, definitions, a reference to the 9000 standard. Sections 4 through 7 you can think of as foundation requirements, covering very basic things such as competency, the quality policy, establishment of processes, and so forth. Section 8 is the primary section, at least in terms of where the auditor will spend his or her time, covering things like sale of product, design, purchasing, manufacturing, and so forth. Section 9 is a collection of all the various evaluation methods and techniques, so things like product inspection, internal auditing, management review, and so forth. These are found in Section 9. And then Section 10 is all of the various improvement methods. It includes things like corrective action and continual improvement. Now, taken together, Sections 4 through 10 follow a plan, do, check, act cycle. And of course, that's one of the more important ideas that has been part of the ISO 9000 standard since all the way back in the 2000 version. Now, another big change, of course, in ISO 9001 is risk. And risk is kind of scary for a lot of people. I think word is getting out that it's not something you need to be quite so afraid of. But let's address how it's been included in this standard. The term risk is used a total of 16 times in the auditable portion of ISO 9001:2015. That means in sections 4 through 10. And the idea is that the identification and management of risk is a system-wide strategy. This is very much in the spirit of what they were doing with continual improvement back when ISO 9001:2000 was published. The idea that it is something that permeates all of the various areas of your quality management system, and not a set of standalone activities. Among other things, and we'll be reiterating this later, you're not required to have a formal risk management process to meet this requirement. ISO 9002 provides some insight on this, saying that key risks that need to be considered include the failure of your processes, failure of your products, and the failure of your services to meet requirements, or an overall risk, an organization that is not achieving customer satisfaction. Let's take a look now at how risk is discussed in the standard by exploring the primary clause, and that is section 6.1. In 6.1, there are two subclauses, and the first reads as follows. When planning for the quality management system, the organization shall consider the issues that are referred to in section 4.1, that refers to both internal and external issues, and we'll explore that a bit later, and the requirements that are referred to in section 4.2. The reference to 4.2 is a reference to interested parties, and that's also a concept we'll be digging into a little bit later. And by doing so, you will then determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed. And you'll note that both of those terms are used, risks and opportunities. And as we dig into the lettered subclauses down here, you'll get a sense of why they mention both of those terms. Risk-based thinking, which is the phrase that's actually used by the standard, is intended to do a couple of things. It's intended to help you prevent or reduce undesired effects, subclause C, so in other words, prevent bad things, but it's also intended to help you enhance desirable effects. So in other words, if something is good, if something contributes positively to your system, let's do more of that. Let's identify what that is and do more of that. And that's where we have not just risks, but also opportunities. And you know, what are we trying to accomplish with these activities? Well, we want to make sure that the quality management system achieves its intended results, and overall we want to achieve improvement. Risk-based thinking is absolutely viewed as a contributor to improvement. Now in 6.1.2, the other subclause here, We have a discussion on actions. You will plan your actions to address the risks and opportunities, and then take a look at how this is worded, how to integrate and implement those actions into quality management system processes, which reemphasizes what I mentioned earlier. This is not necessarily a mandatory standalone risk management process. The idea is that you will incorporate risk-based thinking into your existing processes. So what do they mean by actions to address risks and opportunities? Well, again, we turn to ISO 9002 for some further guidance on what they're going for there. And ISO 9002 breaks this down into three kind of subcategories of what actions might mean. They talk about risk avoidance. Just don't do it anymore. No longer performing the process in question. Risk limitation or risk mitigation. And this could be through things like establishing procedures, work instructions, new training techniques, and so forth. So you've identified the risk. You can't eliminate it, you can't step around it, but you can mitigate it through some of these actions. And then also risk sharing, working with your customers, working with your external providers. One of the examples that they give is if there is a potential for raw material shortage, perhaps your customers would agree to bulk purchase of raw material so that they're sharing the risk with you. So again, avoidance, limitation, and sharing. How do we tie risk-based thinking back to ISO 9001-2008? And this is one of the things that I've really tried to emphasize in my teaching on this topic. There's a lot that you are already doing in ISO 9001-2008 that is risk-based thinking in nature. 4 clauses in particular. 5.6, management review. You're already assessing your overall system. You're already looking for improvement efforts and improvement opportunities. 7.2.2, review of requirements related to the product. You're already assessing customer expectations. You're already resolving discrepancies therein. 6.2.2, training. You're already assessing what is needed from a competency perspective and ensuring that your personnel are qualified. And then most obviously, preventive action. Assessing what are the potential problems and what actions do we need to take to avoid those problems. Now, how is risk going to be audited? We have instructed our auditors to begin with an open-ended question and to examine whatever is presented by the auditee. We expect that, as we looked at on the previous slide, a lot of the ISO 9001-2008 methodologies will be brought to bear. But most importantly, what we expect is that our clients will understand the concept of risk-based thinking, and they'll be in a position to explain what their approach has been. That is of paramount importance to us. Continuing on with the changes to ISO 9001, let's explore some key changes in terminology. The phrases procedures, records, and documents have all been eliminated and have been replaced with the phrase documented information. Now, if you look at Annex A6, there is an explanation, some clarification on this term, and it is paired with the words maintain and retain, and it's explained as follows. If you find a phrase in the standard where it says you will maintain documented information or it will be maintained as documented information, those are generally understood to be a replacement for past references to document, procedure, quality manual, and so forth. Now, there's only a few of these that are required. One good example is in section 4.3, where it is required that the scope of the quality management system be documented. Now, if you see any phrase that refers to retained documented information or retained as documented information, That is to be understood as a replacement for references to records. Now obviously there's a lot more of those circumstances in the standard. One good example is section 933, which requires that records of management review be retained. Another terminology change, all references to product now read as products and services. We've already kind of explored what their motivation was in doing that. Management responsibility has become a larger idea now called leadership. And this is pushing, of course, the idea that management leads by example and involvement rather than simply directing that activities are performed. Continual improvement has become part of a larger section now called improvement. And the idea here is that continual improvement is one part of an improvement strategy. There's also breakthroughs, reactive changes, reorganizations, and so forth. These are also to be taken as contributing to the improvement of the quality management system. Suppliers are now referred to as external providers. And this was a kind of a twofold item here. One, again, to accommodate service organizations, but also as a collective term, not just outside suppliers, but also associate companies, outsource companies. ISO 9002 even weighs in and indicates that the corporate headquarters is an example of an external provider. ISO 9001-2015 has eliminated the last of the required procedures. You've probably heard, and it is true, there are no required procedures in ISO 9001-2015, nor is there a requirement for a quality manual and no requirements for any work instructions. So an organization could theoretically achieve certification without any of those items. It's absolutely possible. However, what we will be looking for in that situation is consistent and effective processes. So I've had a number of people say to me, well, how do you audit a company without procedures? Simple. I look for consistency in what they're telling me about their processes, and I look to see that their records are consistent as well. If I'm seeing wavering in either of those, I'm going to conclude that the processes are ineffective. So if you can have a consistent, effective process without a procedure, that's great, and we will respect that within the audit process. I do also want to point out that if you choose to have a procedure under ISO 9001-2015, please bear in mind that it is not suddenly free from audit scrutiny just because the standard doesn't require it. Anything that you maintain at will, whether it be a work instruction or a quality manual or a procedure, the contents of that document are admissible as audit criteria. So bear that in mind. The title management representative has been eliminated from the standard. Now the implication here is not that the responsibility has been eliminated, but that the functions that that party was tasked with fall to top management. And we're going to be exploring a little bit later which clause really nails that home in terms of the responsibility for management to lead and be responsible for the quality management system. Now I do want to point out, and this will get re-emphasized later as well, this does not mean that you can't appoint a key person for your quality management system. You know, someone that is the focal point for contact with the auditors, someone that leads the management review meetings and so forth. That is certainly permissible. But what cannot happen is for a company to appoint a management representative and push all of the responsibility for the system into that person's hands. That is no longer going to be acceptable. The phrase permissible exclusions has been removed from the standard. and it's been replaced with an idea called non-applicable clauses. Now, this means a couple of things. One, the validity of those designations will be verified at each audit. That's not terribly different from how it is currently approached under permissible exclusions. And your method for documenting your exemptions will likely be unchanged. We've actually got a new webinar that we're going to be rolling out on this very topic. It will be premiering sometime in July, so stay tuned for that. Another big change that was brought in to ISO 9001 was the idea of interested parties. Now, the phrase interested parties and the idea of interested parties is actually rooted in Annex SL. Now, this is something that's going to appear in every ISO 9001 standard. And let's start with the definition for that term. Interested party is a person or organization that can be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision or activity. And there are some examples that are given in the explanation of interested party that appears in the annex of ISO 9001. Now, I want to point out in clause 4.2, it requires the organization to determine who their interested parties are. Now, it emphasizes, though, who are the interested parties that are relevant to your system. Now, the idea here, of course, is that you need to ensure that your quality management system considers all relevant input requirements. Interested party is a way, it's an idea that helps you understand who might that be and who's going to be a contributor to your quality management system. Now, I'd like to share with you over the next few slides what I'm referring to as a year one lesson learned. When we gather our auditors for our annual training, we try as much as possible to share lessons learned. And we're going to go over now in the next few slides some lessons that we shared with our auditors as they pertained to interested parties. So you'll note on the slides here that it states guidance originally provided to PGR auditors. So these are actual slides that we shared with our audit team. When inquiring, it's important to ask, who are the interested parties? Which interested parties are relevant to your system and how? And what part of your system are they relevant to? And the idea was that some interested parties may have a very limited amount of impact. Some may have a very profound impact. One point should be emphasized. It is most likely inappropriate for an organization to conclude that their only interested party is their customer base. And then we shared the definition for interested party with our audit team. Looking then at ISO 9002, we reminded our auditors of how extensive the list of relevant interested parties could be. And as you can see, there's a lot of items here. Customers, franchisors, bankers, unions, external providers, competitors, and so forth. A very, very long list of possibles. How do we figure out what the interested parties want? Another key idea. And again, we turn to ISO 9002 on what the client should be doing to ascertain the needs of their interested parties. And here's what it has to say. Are you reviewing orders? Are you networking? Are you participating in relevant associations? Are you reviewing supply chain relationships? Are you conducting customer, user surveys? Are you monitoring satisfaction and so forth? All of these are inputs to what the interested parties need for you to do as an organization. Now, if the auditee says customers only, Ask leading questions. How did they conclude that customers were the only relevant interested party? And if you are not shown evidence of a structured analysis having been performed, it's probable that the process was flawed and a nonconformance should be issued. And we took that a step further and said there are two circumstances where a nonconformance is likely appropriate. If you have no evidence or limited evidence of an implemented process for monitoring and reviewing information, that would violate ISO 9001:2015 Clause 4.2. Or if you have no evidence that interested party feedback is being discussed within management review, that would fall under ISO 9001:2015 Clause 932C1. So moving on then, let's explore the impact that the new requirements are going to have on your audits. And we're going to do this from a clausal perspective, give you some ideas on the impact that these clauses will have. And we begin with Section 4. In 4.1, it requires that you have determined, monitored, and review external and internal issues relevant to the purpose and strategic direction of your quality management system. This is obviously a very high-level item. I will point out the use of the term strategic direction. We're going to be revisiting that term in just a few slides. In terms of how this is to be audited, how this is to be assessed, for the most part, we have used management interviews as our approach for ensuring that this particular clause is being fulfilled. Now, ISO 9002 gives a little bit of guidance on the idea of internal and external issues, and they even provide kind of a list of what those issues might be. For example, for internal issues, they mention, are you considering the overall performance, your resource needs, your competency needs, operational performance needs, and so forth. And as far as external issues are concerned, they talk about economic issues, such as exchange rates, social issues, safety regulations, local unemployment, market issues. What's your competition? What are your market trends, and so forth. Again, all of this is guidance, food for thought from ISO 9002. Now in Clause 4.2, we take the idea of external and internal, and now we introduce officially in the standard interested parties. Has the organization determined who its interested parties are and established a process to monitor and review the information about the interested parties? So in terms of how we've chosen to audit this, we have addressed this via the management interview, and we've instructed our auditors, again, to ask these open-ended questions and really try to drive home, you know, does the management of this company have a grasp on who their interested parties are and a process for monitoring their needs and their feedback. Looking at Section 4.3, is the scope statement appropriate? Is it accurate? And does it account for internal and external issues, interested parties, and the products and services of the organization? This particular item is new in a sense, but it's not so new. We've long since had a process in place for ascertaining, is there a scope statement and is it accurate? So we enhanced that question a bit in the audit report so that our auditors are really asking about the scope and really exploring, is it appropriate? 4.3 is also where we have discussion on exemptions. And again, exemptions can be sought from any requirement of the standard. Our section for assessing this is, for the most part, unchanged. We're simply verifying that your exemptions are justified and that they don't impact your quality system. Again, we have a new webinar that'll be premiering soon on this very topic. Looking then at Section 5, we have perhaps the most important new clause in the ISO 9001 standard, and that is 511A, where it states that management has to make itself accountable for the effectiveness of the quality management system. This clause alone led to some rather dramatic changes in PJR's workbook. So I'd like to take a few minutes now and explore with you what those changes were. We had to expand the portions of the audit that deal directly with leadership. And we put a special section in our audit report that has several targeted questions that our auditors are expected to ask the management team under the heading Leadership Interview. And we also tweaked the audit report a bit to direct our auditors to make sure that leadership is involved in the system, that they're not just sitting on the sidelines. So again, I'd like to share with you some training that we gave the auditors at the annual training sessions that was directed on this very topic and how we advised them that we were going to be expecting them to approach this concept. So leadership means multiple persons in most cases. In some cases, when we get the completed audit report, we noted that only a single individual was included in the leadership interview. And we noted that, well, that's conceivable if it's a very small company, 3 people, 4 people. It is less plausible in any situation with a higher employee count. So in other words, leadership means a team. There's multiple participants in the management of a quality system. ISO 9002 weighs in on this just a bit as well. It states that although certain authorities and responsibilities can be delegated, accountability, there's that word, accountability, remains with top management. In other words, you can still appoint a management representative, call them a management representative even if you wish, but you can no longer expect to have limited to no involvement in the quality management system if you are part of top management or leadership. Continuing on with Section 5, in 511B, has management assured that the quality policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the company? I promised you an explanation of this clause a few slides ago, and here we go, or this phrase rather, strategic direction. Interestingly, strategic direction is not a term that has been officially defined. It's not defined in ISO 9000, ISO 9001, and it's not really defined in ISO 9002 either. So it was necessary for me to reach out to some of our colleagues in the industry, members of the ISO, and kind of get a sense of what were they going for with that term, with that phrase. And the consensus that came back was, well, strategic direction is a vision of where the organization wants to be in the future, its mission, and the long view, so to speak. The intent was, you have these objectives, these KPIs that you're looking 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead. Well, how do those things contribute to what you are looking at when you look 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, and so forth? Now, how do we audit that? Well, a couple of things. We'll be looking at management review. We'll be interviewing management, obviously, and trying to get a sense what is the forward trajectory for this organization? Do they even have a forward trajectory? 511C talks about ensuring that quality management system requirements are integrated into business processes. When this clause first came out, it was very much misunderstood that we were going to be auditing your accounting books, and fortunately that's not the case. What this clause really is driving at is, okay, let's try to integrate some of these best practices into the business process activities. So what might that mean? Well, revision control on documents, ensuring that personnel are competent, ensuring that records are controlled in such a way that they're traceable. These are all things that are appropriate and to be expected throughout the organization, whether it's a quality management system process or a business process. ISO 9002 even provides a little bit of clarification on what they're going for here, and says that the quality management system processes need to be integrated and managed within the overall business process and not treated as add-on or conflicting activities. In other words, ISO is not something that you work on every other Friday. It's supposed to be something that is part of your day-to-day activities and fully integrated into your organization. Turning then to section 5.2, has the organization ensured that quality policy is available to all relevant interested parties? Now this was really what they were going for with clause 5.3 in ISO 9001-2008. But they've made it a little more crystal clear now in the 2015 revision. So many of you already have good methods in place for sharing your quality policy with the members of your staff. So they're also talking about external interested parties, customers, and so forth. So some obvious ways. You can post it in your front entryway. You can post it on your website. ISO 9002 even says that if you're so inclined, you can make it available upon request if you want to kind of keep it close to the chest. That counts as making it available. In 5.3, we have the official acknowledgement of management taking on responsibility for the quality management system. We've already established the way to interpret this. In 5.3b, has management ensured a means to monitor if processes are delivering intended outputs? This is not a new idea, but it is new verbiage for the standard. Our existing approach on auditing KPIs or quality objectives will be our approach for auditing this clause. And with that, we turn to Section 6. And Section 6, of course, is where we find the primary clause pertaining to risk. Now, I've already kind of made my point on this, but just to re-emphasize, we will have an open mind on what you have done to address this requirement, and we'll begin with a very open-ended question pertaining to what has your approach to risk-based thinking been. There's really only a few specific things that you're required to do to meet this requirement. The rest is at your discretion and based on what your needs are as an organization. And that then factors into Section 6.1.2 as well. So with that, let's turn to Section 6.2.1, and we have a little bit of a change in the wording for the quality objectives requirement. Are quality objectives relevant to conformity of products, and do they enhance customer satisfaction? Now, our existing audit methods will be brought to bear for this particular clause, but what I want to point out, what's critical for you to understand, is that this does not preclude you from having objectives in other areas. And let me explain what I mean by other areas. We've had clients in the past that have had objectives for things like safety, profitability, and so forth. Those are perfectly acceptable objectives to have, and we're certainly not going to dissuade you from doing so. However, you need to be prepared to show that you also have objectives that meet these criteria, that relate to product conformity and customer satisfaction enhancement. So again, safety and dollars and cents types objectives, you can still have those, but they cannot be all you have for this requirement. Have objectives been analyzed to assign resources, identify responsible parties, establish a timeline, determine evaluation practices. Again, this has long been in place. The scope of what we can actually ask for has been expanded. And with that, we turn then to Section 7. And the primary new requirement in Section 7 is organizational knowledge. We've actually got 2 slides for this one. Organizational knowledge is another one of the really brand new ideas in ISO 9001:2015. And frankly, I think it's been overlooked a little bit. I don't hear as much chatter about organizational knowledge as I do about risk and interested parties. So first of all, what is organizational knowledge? Well, it is generally understood as knowledge that is gained through experience. Now, we've all got people in our organizations that are essential, people that have run a particular machine or managed a particular account for many years. They are experts, and we would be hurting if those people were to one day no longer be coming in every day. So what the standard says is you need to have a way to retain that person's knowledge as much as possible and make it available. So they talk about training methods, they talk about documentation, and so forth. Additionally, you are expected to learn from the past. You know, if you have mistakes that are made, you need to be able to improve based on what you've learned. Again, you know, the knowledge that you've gained through past trials. You know, so that might come to bear in things like corrective action, responses to customer complaints, and so forth. And in 7.16, we also state that have you establish a process to assess your current competency and compare it with the needs and trends. In other words, can you look down the road and see, okay, here are the competency challenges that I will be facing. Now in 9002, they have some ideas on organizational knowledge, and they talk about succession planning. They talk about awareness sessions even. A company newsletter even could be considered a way of trying to address this requirement to show that we're not going to suddenly be in a world of hurt because one key person is no longer coming in. From there, we transition to Section 8, and in Section 8 we have a couple of requirements that pertain to design. If you are responsible for the design of your products, do the design inputs include standards and or codes of practice that the organization has committed to implement? This is very similar to the existing requirement that statutory and regulatory requirements be considered when you are designing your product. Additionally, do your design inputs consider potential consequences of failure due to the nature of products and services? Now, in both of these cases, our methods for auditing these items will be the same as what we've done in the past to audit a design process. We typically, we are going to be interviewing the engineers, we're going to be reviewing design projects. This particular new requirement in terms of consequences, it was suggested that it could include safety, financial fallout, and so forth. This requirement also, obviously, is very much impacted by what your contribution to design is. If you're designing a single component of a much larger assembly, it's difficult to consider in full the potential consequences of failure. If you are designing an end user product, obviously you've got more of a perspective on what those fallout items might be. In Section 8.4, we have some new items that pertain to external providers. Have you established a method to communicate your intentions in control and monitoring of external provider performance to the external providers? In other words, do you share with them how you monitor their performance? And obviously we have a number of things that we do to monitor external provider performance, and a number of ways that we communicate with external providers, whether it be purchase orders, contracts, the content of your website, and so forth. Also, with external providers, do we have controls in place for external provider property where ownership does not transfer to the organization? This is very similar to the requirement that was in place previously for customer property. And the idea here is that, well, those same ideas are in play if it's external provider property. Now, the example that I like to use is, let's say that you are going to install a powder coat station in your company, and it's a lot of expense up front, and so you decide to lease the powder coat booth and the guns and the ventilation system and so forth, and you don't own it. Well, if that's the case, the standard says that you are to treat that in the same manner as you would customer property in terms of recording damage, reporting damage to the owner, and so forth. In 8.5.5, we have some new requirements under the heading post-delivery activities, and for the most part this has been established as being for warranty circumstances, disposal of product, and so forth. For the most part, the existing assessments that we have of contractual and planning activities will be the likely methodologies. Has the organization determined a process for responding to unplanned changes in such a way that conformity with specified requirements is maintained? Now, there's two types of changes as we see it. There are planned changes and unplanned changes. Planned changes, for the most part, are going to be on the record. There's going to be enough evidence in planning meetings, in management review, and other places where that will be captured. Unplanned changes is where things might get tricky. So we have theorized that there's going to be corrective action records, customer complaint records, possibly special meeting records, and so forth, to show that there is a process that is followed when a change that is unplanned is rolled out. And again, is it on the record? With that, we transition to Section 9. This is actually the last of the new clauses. Has management review been structured such that it includes the 3 new required topics? And those are internal and external issue changes, including the effect on the strategic direction, external supplier performance, and assessment of risk management action. And you will note that in terms of risk management records, risk action records, this is the one and only place in the standard where it is mandatory that it be on the record, is within management review. So do bear that in mind. And then obviously our existing methodologies for assessment of management review will be brought to bear with no change in technique. I'd like to take a few minutes and share with you an important part of ISO 9001, and that is Annex A. Now, we mentioned earlier the ISO 9002 guidance standard that's available for purchase. Annex A is an integrated part of ISO 9001. It is included. And there are 8 subsections, and each provides some important things for you to consider in understanding some of the new requirements. In A1, structure and terminology, it's established that you do not have to align your documents to match ISO 9001, and you don't have to use the specific terms that are used in ISO 9001. So for example, you don't have to have if you choose to have a procedure for purchasing, it doesn't have to be procedure number 8.4. And if you want to keep calling them suppliers, call them suppliers. You don't have to suddenly start referring to them as external providers just because that's how it appears in the standard. A2 is called products and services. It's an explanation of the intent in changing all the references of product to read products and services. A3 is a exploration of the concept of interested parties. We looked at some of that a little bit earlier in our presentation. A4 is a discussion of risk-based thinking and a re-emphasis that a formal process for risk management is not required. So that's written right into the standard itself, that you don't have to have a risk management process. A5 provides some discussion on why they removed the term permissible exclusions from the standard and the new idea of non-applicable clauses. In A6, we looked at this earlier. This is the whole idea of documented information, and the phrases maintained documented information and retained documented information. In A7, we have a special explanation of organizational knowledge. We looked at that in depth earlier. And then finally A8, we looked at this earlier as well, the whole idea of what is an external provider and how do we approach our relationship with external providers. I'd like to transition now to some FAQs from past presentations to give you some insight into understanding some of these new requirements. Will our staff have to complete transition training? It's a great question, and for the most part the answer is yes. You will be expected to provide some form of transition training to your staff. At a minimum, we would expect that you are going to provide awareness training of the new standard and that you will have assessed the new standard's impact on the various processes and personnel within your company. But it is entirely conceivable that the majority of your staff will feel no effect from your company transitioning to ISO 9001:2015. The person that is out on the brake press, the person that drives the truck every day, the person that takes orders from the customer every day, very likely those parties are going to feel little to no effect in you changing from ISO 9001:2008 to ISO 9001:2015. What about internal auditors? Do they have to complete transitional training? Well, the key thing to bear in mind with internal auditing is that it is another competency within your system. And that means that it is up to you as the organization to decide what it means to be competent. So, and that includes transition training. So if you have an existing team of auditors that have long performed your internal audits and they know your processes in and out, it's entirely conceivable that they can do a period of self-study and successfully transition to auditing the new standard. Now obviously, as has long been the case, the competency of your internal auditors will be judged by the overall effectiveness of your internal audit process. Is there a recommended order of steps to follow? Well, I do like to share the steps as promoted by the International Accreditation Forum in their ID9. And they advocate a 7-step process. Number 1, read the standard. Have top management acquire a copy of the standard and go through it from front to back to identify the gaps that need to be addressed. Number 2, draw up a plan of implementation with assigned responsibilities. Number 3, update any applicable documents that need to reflect new or revised processes. Step 4, provide all necessary awareness and transition training. Step 5, a full system internal audit followed by a management review. Step 6, corrective action for all internal audit findings in process or complete. And then finally, coordination with PJR for planning of transition arrangements. This is an exciting time for quality system certification. ISO 9001:2015 we feel is a beneficial update to a standard that has had a long track record of contribution to the world. We are confident that for the vast majority of our clients, this transition will proceed with minimal difference from past assessments, and that you will enjoy a host of benefits in your transition to the new standard. We are ready to ensure that your organization has a smooth transition. I would like to invite you to visit our website at www.pjr.com. We do have a whole wealth of resources available for you, including a side-by-side comparison between ISO 9001:2008 and 2015, as well as an FAQ report that highlights key questions and answers. If you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, on our website at the bottom of the front page, if you enter your email address and click subscribe, you'll be automatically put into our database and receive our news updates, our newsletters, and other points of information. I do thank you for hanging in there with me. I know this was a long presentation. I'm going to unlock the question portion of the dashboard here, and we'll see what questions we have today, and I do ask that you bear with me. Okay. Okay. Lisa Burkhardt asks a question about the scheduling of her audit, her transition audit. Lisa, the best person to speak to on your transition arrangement would be your individual scheduler. Stephen Morhoko says, I don't understand how a corporate headquarters would be considered an external provider. Well, Stephen, there's a number of possibilities in that situation. For example, if the corporate headquarters provides product designs, that would be an external provider. If the corporate headquarters provides support on product returns, if the corporate headquarters provides the billing process, all of those things could potentially be representative of an external provider. Anita Reed, if we continue to maintain our quality manual, are we required to use the new terminology in those documents? And I believe we addressed that earlier, but the short answer to that question is no. You are permitted to keep existing procedure numbering and existing procedure wording. Santosh Mishra, how is a stakeholder different from an interested party? I suppose conceptually there'd be no difference at all. Those two terms are probably interchangeable. Interested party is the term that is, of course, used in the standard. Bruce Newman, so we will be looking for evidence of the quality management system being actively addressed within support teams. Would we expect them to be users of established document control, CAPA, or other QMS processes? Bruce, I'll try to address those ideas. In terms of document control, yes, the expectation would be that, as you put it, support teams would be using document control protocols. Corrective action, remember that corrective action is very much a, it's an item that's at the organization's discretion in most cases when do we determine that a corrective action opportunity exists, unless you are being demanded to provide a corrective action by your customer. So I don't think that would be any different for your support teams. So I hope that I've addressed your question. Okay, we've had some questions on receiving copies. Again, the slides will be made available shortly after we're finished. Okay. Anita Reed, I'm glad we addressed your question. Okay, but Wahid asks, I am working with my wife. We are the only two in the company. We process not with procedures, but we do our work the proper way, like data remove, timeline, documentation, future planning, awareness, and related scopes. We import mobile phones from the United States, give them a new life. The unused or changed old parts we give to... Okay, so you're questioning and external issues except with R2 certification. That's a lengthy question. I'm trying to kind of break it down to what you're actually asking me. If you have concluded that there are no other external issues other than are the outside companies that you're working with R2 certified, if that's what you have concluded, then so be it. That's completely appropriate. Chris Sweat is asking, do we have webinars for IETF 2016? Absolutely. Please do check our website for when those are going to be shown. Dan Jones asks, can you elaborate on what a scope statement is? Certainly. Scope, as it is determined within Section 4 of the standard, is what is the activity for which the quality management system has been developed. Most of the time it's going to be all of the activities of an organization. There are some situations where it is a more limited scope. So, you know, manufacture of industrial tires could be a scope. Okay. Samantha Berg, can we just prove that we do risk-based things through questions that are asked with no physical documentation? Yes, that's the first step, but remember that risk management actions are required to be captured in management review. And also bear in mind that whoever we're interviewing, everyone needs to be on the same page and telling us the same explanation for risk actions. James Clyson asks, what is the minimum amount of data needed to establish the new standard is being followed? James, we don't have a magic bullet number in terms of how many months or how many days. You simply need to be prepared to demonstrate that you've implemented the requirements. So if that can be shown with 2 weeks worth of data, that will be acceptable. Okay. Tim Lyons asks, 8343 states that the organization shall include the type and extent of control in the scope of its QMS and outsourced service conforming to ISO requirements. Is the scope of the QMS referred to as an actual document? Tim, the standard requires that the scope be maintained as documented information, and that's established in Section 4.3. It's one of the few firm documentation requirements that appears in the standard. I'm looking for the clause that you're referring to, and I am not seeing it. There is no subclause 8.3.4.3, at least not in ISO 9001. Okay. Kelly McCune-Kelly asks, so a physical quality manual for ISO 9001 2015 is no longer required to be presented in the audit. Am I correct in understanding the audit will be more of an actual interview instead of a review of physical documentation? Ideally, Kelly, that's how the audit should be done now. There are very few mandatory procedures in ISO 9001 2008, and it is my hope that our auditors are wearing off shoe leather, interviewing people, getting out into the production area, getting into the areas where the work is being done, and less worried about reading procedures. Again, procedures are one way to approach the management of a system, and they are certainly admissible as criteria within an audit. But the short answer to your question is yes, and hopefully it's been that way for some time. Lee Pennington, do our SOPs and documentation forms need the new standard number on them? No, they do not. Stephen Coates asks, is there IETF transition specific training? We do have webinars that will be shown in a few weeks on IETF 16949. And Rebecca Aspinwall says, will there be a webinar for AS 9100? Absolutely. Greg Runyon, provide another example of meeting the requirement of organizational competence. Greg, I'm going to guess that you're referring to organizational knowledge. And again, organizational knowledge is really, it's viewed in a couple of key pieces. One, do we have the means to retain the knowledge that's been gained through experience? You know, whether that is developing new training materials, work instructions, doing cross-training on our staff and so forth. And then also, do we have the means to look ahead and be ready for the competency challenges that are coming? Okay. Santiago Castro asks, will a strategic plan be required to demonstrate strategic direction? Will it need to be audited internally? Santiago, it's not required that you have a strategic plan on the record, but again, the idea is, do you have a long-term vision? And that's going to be borne out really through discussion with your management team. Tim Lyons asks, our customer sends drawings and we make parts to them. Can we take exception to section 8322? Tim, I think you're asking, can you exclude section 8.3? And the answer to that is yes. If product designs are being provided by customers, you can absolutely exclude the design requirements. Okay. Greg Runyon, an organization can still determine what product lines to include in the quality management system, correct? Yes, there is still a allowance for a limited scope. We absolutely still permit that. Philip Sugg asks, how is it determined or demonstrated that leadership is properly involved? Well, Philip, there's a lot of ways that that can be approached. That's going to be obviously very dependent on the type of company that you have. We have not told our auditors to have any specific expectations, but there are some obvious things. Are they participants in management review? Are they participants in complaint resolution? Are they participants in the corrective action process? Are they aware of the performance of the metrics and so forth? Goldie Rowe asks, if we are transitioning, do we have to have a certified auditor conduct an audit? Goldie, I'm going to presume, Goldie, that you're asking, do you have to have a certified auditor conduct your internal audit? And the short answer to that is no. They don't have to be certified. They have to meet your own internal competency expectations. And the audit has to be effective. Sergio Castro asks, how do we document in our quality system the new standard when we are not still certified? Sergio, I do apologize. I'm not fully understanding your question. In terms of achieving certification, you have to obviously have processes established that are consistent and effective. Okay, Chris Sweat, you've provided a clarification on your question. I would ask, since it is related to IETF, that it be addressed offline and in a separate forum. Kelly McCune. Kelly, if it hasn't been for us because we have been using a different company which is entirely documentation based, somewhat of a nightmare. Sounds like we should switch to Perry Johnson. Well, Kelly, we'd be delighted to have you as our client, and yes, we absolutely encourage our auditors. I mean, I'll speak very frankly here. Get out of the conference room. Auditing is not about sitting at a conference room table and reading a procedure from front to back. It is supposed to be get your hands dirty, wear out your feet, make sure that you're auditing things where they happen, sampling, interviewing multiple people, taking multiple samples of records. That's what we certainly try to inspire our auditors to do in the context of their audit activities. So if that sounds like a better fit for you, we'd really love to have you as our client. Jennifer Lindsay, can we use these webinars for training staff, or are there copyright restrictions? Jennifer, we absolutely would be delighted for you to use our webinars as a training opportunity. The slides are yours to download. They are available for download, and spread the word. I'd be honored. Santosh Mishra, can the organization repository, which has lessons learned, be admissible for organizational knowledge? I'll say that sight unseen, that sounds promising. I would want to assess it a little more in depth to make a final determination. Christina McCarthy, is there a requirement to update our manual to follow ISO 9001:2015 to make it auditable? Well, Christina, if your manual says ISO 9001:2008 right on the cover, yes, that aspect of it you're going to want to update. But if what it is a representation of here's the scope of our system, here are the activities that don't apply, and so forth, that would be an appropriate way to meet both standards. Okay. Okay, we have a follow-up question from Kelly McCune. Four-person company, is it appropriate for there to be one person that is upper management and one other person identified as upper management? I'd say the way you've described it, Kelly, the two of you sound like the leadership of the company to me. Okay, Beth Gornowich says, our PGR auditor has informed us we do not need to perform customer surveys as the data collected is generally not a good sampling of our customer base. She states our customer satisfaction can be measured by returned orders and customer correspondence. Beth, I'm going to say that is not incorrect, the second part of your statement. Customer satisfaction is a very broad item, and we are certainly open to other ideas. I would personally say that, you know, if you feel that you're getting some benefit from the customer survey process, I don't think you should discontinue it. But the second part of your question is absolutely true. Yes. Rebecca, I beg your pardon, Rebecca Aspinwall asks, we are a process provider performing a process on customer consigned products. Can we claim exclusion to design and development? Rebecca, I would really prefer to not give you a firm judgment here and defer to the on-site auditor's assessment and also a more in-depth review of your particular case. So I must beg your pardon, but I don't feel comfortable giving you a firm yes or no at this time. Sergio Castro, we want to include in our quality system the new requirements. How should we do it? Well, Sergio, again, the best approach is to define what your processes are and how they are controlled. I'd say any more specific advice than that would be best sought from a consultant. Tim Lyons, should I have all my documentation changed to reference 9001:2015 and IATF 16949 prior to the transition audits? as my docs reference the soon-to-be obsolete standards. Tim, I would say yes, that would probably be an appropriate step to take. Jeff Larson, how many companies have already transitioned with the deadline coming up next year? Jeff, I don't have any firm numbers on that. I know that we're having transitioning clients every week, and we have some clients that are putting things off a bit. We are certainly encouraging, actively encouraging any clients that are up for audits to consider it and to take care of the transition now and avoid being part of a resource crunch later. Tashin James Salami asks, will a recording of the webinar be available? Yes. Check the website under previously recorded webinars. The voiceover will be maintained then. Jeff Larson asks a follow-up question, is there a reason to put things off? Well, Jeff, that's going to vary, I suppose, from case to case. There are some new items, but honestly, if you've got an effective quality system, it's our contention that most companies should be able to pursue certification with minimal concern. So I would hope that for most of our clients, it's not something that they are all of that scared about. Okay, well, I do thank you all for your time and wish you all a very good day.